Hi everyone. I thought I'd share a few thoughts. Today's been a bit of a strange day, and I've been in a reflective mood. I think that would be the best way to put it. Today's been a funny day because it's the anniversary of my brother's death. I've lost two brothers on the same day, but years apart. And some of it was a learning curve for me. I realised that I lost a brother at an early age, and it impacted me at that time. And I realised years later that I hadn't let go of some of the negative emotions associated with that. And it also taught me that you deal with death and depression and all the negative emotions that go with that. You can deal with it in different ways, in the fact that there's different scenarios. Death affects you differently at different times. And what I mean by that is, I lost my father. He was the first person I lost in 1987, and I'd be about 31. So that was the first difficult loss. But 8 months after it, I lost an older brother. He died very suddenly. He more or less fell ill on a Thursday, and by the Saturday he was gone. And he was only 36, and I was 32. And worse still, that year worse was still to come, because that was if you think about my mother had lost her first child. We come from a big family of 8, and Frank, my brother, would be the middle child of the 8. But the worst that was still to come was that her sisters, another 2 of her sisters, all lost a child that year, and they were all adults. So that was it. I lost my brother and 2 cousins in the same year, and so that was a difficult year. And as I say, I was only 32, so I tried to handle that the best way I could. I won't tell you how I dealt with it, but you can imagine I was quite low, and I struggled, but I tried my best. But I found out years later that I still was holding on to things. And like I said, today has got me thinking. My young brother Tommy, he passed away in 1994. He was 32. I was 38 at the time. And more recently, when I say recently, I mean 2016, I lost my older brother, Hugh. He was 66. But Tommy and Hugh both passed on the 28th of May. So that's what kind of makes it poignant and makes you think about things. Go back in there, and I'm not saying woe is me. I'm not looking for any sympathy. It's the way things have happened and how I see them. My mother got to 80 years of age, and although I love my mother dearly, it didn't hurt me. It didn't hit me as bad as the rest, and I think it was because I could see it coming. She was ill for a while, and there was a mental preparation takes place. That's just my theory, because I love my mother so. I was going to say I was a blue-eyed boy. I better not say that. But I love my mother dearly. I was the 6th child, but it's just that point. I love her. I miss her. I think about her a lot. But that didn't impact me the same. It didn't impact me. I coped with it better. It did impact me, but I coped with it so much better because I knew what was coming. I knew the process, and I had been there before. But what I really want to share is my experience of losing my brother Frank. As I say, he was the first to go, the first of my siblings, the first of my cousins. And what was strange about it was years later, I'm talking 20 years later, where I let go of an awful lot of emotion, an awful lot of repressed emotions. Maybe you could call it grief. It probably was grief. But I didn't know it was there. This is what I wanted to share. I didn't know that it was there. It was. I decided one day to sit in front of my computer, and I was writing little chapters of my life, little stories about the things we got up to as kids, mostly about me and my friends, when we would build a swing in the country, or the mischief we would get up to as kids. And then I started writing stories about my brother Frank. Now, there was 4 years between me and my brother Frank. And then, I think it was 10 minutes into writing the story, just this chapter of my life, I think it was about 10 minutes into it, when I was overcome with grief. I was overcome with emotion. It was like I was back to the day that I lost him. And I just couldn't control it. I had to let all this grief come out. I had to let it all out. And I was very surprised, because I'm thinking, where did that come from? I couldn't understand it at first, why it happened. Why would it happen 20 years later? What was different? I've thought about him many times. I've spoke about him many times. But I used to, when I would speak of him, I would feel a little lump in my throat. And that was getting less and less and less. The more I spoke about it, I wasn't afraid to talk about him. I didn't avoid it. But I did notice that as I did speak of him, I would get choked up a wee bit. And it was getting less and less as the years went by. Well, after this episode of sitting there writing a wee story and all the grief coming out, a lot of crying, I was in the house alone, thankfully. I say thankfully because that probably allowed me to let as much of it out, or all of it out. And what occurred to me was that a theory I kind of come up with or dreamt up, that was when you go into trance, when you go into hypnosis, then you have all sorts of emotions that could be trapped, that are held down, repressed. You've got the memories, you can remember an event, but the emotion associated with that event can be repressed, can be hidden. And I visualised it as being like big air bubbles stuck inside mud. The emotions are like bubbles trapped inside this mud. And then when you go into the trance state, when you go into hypnosis, the mud starts to turn into water, becomes more fluid, and the air bubbles pop up. They pop up to the surface. But the thing about it is that when they pop to the surface, once they're released, they're gone. That's them, they're gone. And my proof of that, or my belief in that, is that from that moment on, it felt so good for that to be gone, for to have released that. It felt, I was going to say great, it felt great in the sense that every time from then on, I could speak of my brother Frank, I could remember him fondly, I could tell stories, I could talk about when we were kids, I could talk about when we were adults, some of the mischief that we would get up to, and I could remember him fondly. I didn't get choked up. I didn't feel that sensation of there's something else there. So that's the thing I wanted to share, that I have this understanding now about emotion. I have this understanding about grief and how it varies. It depends. Like I say, with my mother, I could see it coming. The grief was different. I could let it out in a controlled fashion. I still let it go, but it was gone in a very short time. Within a month, I'd let go of all the grief associated with that. But for my brother Frank, little did I know, it was going to take me 20 years to get rid of the last of that repressed emotion, that grief, that whatever you want to call it. And I was the better for it. That was the point, is I was the better for it. Once it was gone, however that was affecting me, it could have been affecting my health in some way. I just know that I could sense it, I could feel it when I was speaking, and I knew I was happier. I felt a happiness, and I could feel a joy when I think of my brother and I speak of my brother. I could tell some good stories, some funny stories, and feel happy inside doing it. So that was the thing I wanted to share. Is that, and one more thing is, I could tell another story, but I won't. But it's nothing to do with grief. It's just something that happened in my life as a kid that I recall as a funny story. And in a hypnosis session, I was to discover there was emotion attached to that also. And I let that go. So that was it. That's what I wanted to share. So if you have any ideas about that, if you have any thoughts, please share them below. And if you think there's anything that I can help you with, drop me a line. So all the best for now. Have a happy, beautiful day. Thank you. Bye.